attributing some of the sustainable practices to progress always being made on projects, proper monitoring on delivery of projects, as well as a long-standing discipline within their financial management unit. Some of the testimonies they give is that regardless of 1 or 2 staff members in finance not being around, the controls that they respond to are institutionalized controls rather than controls that are dependent on the ability or otherwise of a particular individual. In KwaZulu-Natal, one audit as well in this province, which was Okahlamba, is the only one that is clean in this particular province. Many of them have suffered over the last couple of years issues pertaining to problems in raising and collecting revenue, financial management disciplines that were not carried out according to prescribed rules, a lot of large outsourced water tankering service contracts, which has led to deviations in supply chain disciplines in some of these areas. But also there's been quite a high level of expenditure on consulting services again in KwaZulu-Natal. So the audit outcomes, if you look at them year on year, not much has really changed, but the reality of the reconciliation of the accounting records and how that has been carried out without proper supervision stands out again as one of the key failures in this province. And you will see that the significant number of municipalities that attracted qualifications were largely in Umkhanyakude as well as in Mgungundlovu. And that's where the bulk of the key audit findings were found in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Again, another province with lots of irregular expenditure in the carrying out of their procurement activities. Limpopo is one of the provinces that for a period of time was sitting with a number of disclaimed audit opinions. We did recognize the effort that was put into this area by the Premier in Limpopo. And you'll see that there's been a migration from the disclaimed opinions in this province to largely qualified opinions. However, this particular outcome of qualified opinions came on the back of major investments in consulting services once again, but we did not notice any real consequences for those deficiencies as they were happening over the years. So firstly, in Limpopo, we do recognize that they are making forward steps in the right direction. For the first time after 3 or so years, there is district. The last clean audit that we had in this province was some couple of years ago, and it was Waterberg. We hope that what they are doing, as well as the investment that they've put into the different municipalities, is going to pay off. But let me just highlight one of the key features of what has impacted many of these municipalities in this province. A lot of their project money, which was earmarked for water infrastructure and all of that, as we know, got swallowed in the VBS setup. And some of the infrastructure backlogs that are not capable of being funded are beginning to show now because they no longer have that which was made available to them to pay for that particular infrastructure. But a lot of the deficiencies in financial control are found in water projects again in this province. I think the bulk of their funds were earmarked for improvements in terms of delivering water as well as providing water during the drought relief. And a lot of the deficiencies and the findings that we made in a lot of the municipalities, hence the qualifications, were largely about how they manage those projects as well as how they deliver on them. And that's where the bulk of the weaknesses have been identified. Mpumalanga is one province with a couple of the mixed bag of these audit outcomes, from disclaimer to qualified opinions, but just a few that are clean, which is the Nkangala as well as the Gertsibande districts. But for the rest, all the municipalities under them, they are already showing signs of not so good accounting and financial control systems. In the report, you will see the detail of some of the basic deep dive that we have done to assess what exactly has happened in each of them. There are some interesting examples around municipalities like Victor Kanye, Likwa, Emakazeni. All of that is contained in the report with some detail of the issues that the teams that audited in these environments have detected and are raising as part of the key steps that must be taken. But overall, I think in this province, there has been a deteriorating accountability and financial management coupled with weakened oversight is some of the attributable reasons for the regression in audit outcomes. If we look at the Northern Cape again has not got much to write home about when it comes to these audit outcomes, because it's almost got similar picture as it had in the previous year, with one clean audit. In this case, it's the John Taulo Khatsewe District Municipality. But for the rest of the other districts, the audit outcomes have been very negative. Major contribution is also the fact that many of the municipal managers and chief financial officers and the reliance that they have on external service providers in the form of consultants has been huge. And many of them have admitted, even in the municipal public accounts committees, that since they took on those roles, they don't quite know exactly how to go about doing that which is expected. And I think it's a sobering thought when you hear it from the audit teams, because it suggests that somebody is acknowledging that they've got the responsibility assigned to them to oversee the municipal accounts, for example, of a municipality in Geis, which is far away from many places that people have gone to, and there it may not be that easy to find someone with the requisite capacity and skills to do financial management. Hence, they revert to seeking the services of external service providers. But the question remains, are they not spending more on those external service providers than they should? And there are many illustrative examples in the report to show that even in the Northern Cape, there's a widespread lack of maintenance of infrastructure as well. Some of the infrastructure is aged, and the maintenance of the infrastructure is not kept up to date, hence the consequences of not delivering services in some of those municipalities. And then the Northwest is the second last province. We've also made some serious observations in this province, and you can see that the province is starting to give us the other side of the color code. Glaring absence of any yellows, glaring absence of any greens, which means that there is not a single clean audit in the province of the Northwest. And of course, we have characterized this province as one that has been confronted by systemic breakdown in the discipline of financial control. And I think if you wanted to look at case studies of how financial controls have deteriorated over a period of time, there are many municipalities in this province that have carried disclaimed opinions, sometimes for 6 years, sometimes for 8 years. But when you go back in year number 9, you pretty much find the same people that were responsible for producing those accounts in the previous year. So the financial control disciplines, whether they are in the Ngaka Mudiri Molema district, or whether they are in the Bojanala district, or in the Dr. Ruth Mompati district, you've got a mixed bag of municipalities that have not really signed up to the old discipline of accountability, hence the financial controls that have deteriorated over all these years. And then lastly, the province of the Western Cape, over a period of time, when it comes to the basic financial management disciplines, when it comes to the ability to exercise oversight at leadership level in many of them, they have still shown some levels of sustainability with regards to delivering the audit results that are expected of them. We do note also in this province that they are doing well. The financial health risk in terms of their ability to continue in operational existence does not face major threats. However, we do flag that there are some wobbly areas that need to be watched in the Central Karoo district, because the Central Karoo district has not for a long time produced good sets of audit outcomes, but also some risks that we are also flagging in the Garden Route district, where the likes of Oudtshoorn, Knysna, George, and so on are located. So even though there's been a forward movement, a sustainable path over a number of years of good financial management disciplines in the Western Cape, we do want to make sure that we do not lose sight of the fact that some levels of deterioration are already notable in places like the Central Karoo and also along the Garden Route. So those are the 9 provinces that we have reflected on in this general report, with a lot more detail than we have done before, because we've basically gone into each district and picked a municipality, not all of them, otherwise the report will be too long. We picked a municipality or 2 or 3 and used them to illustrate some of the concepts that we are dealing with in terms of the audit outcomes. So we hope that that will be useful in the sense that it's an attempt to look behind the audit outcome and say what are the things that ought to have been in place in order to assist with the audit outcomes to improve better than they are at the moment. I just want to deal now with one aspect of what we were focusing on in this audit, and that is to do with the implementation of the amendments to the Public Audit Act. If you look at the amendments to the Public Audit Act, they were signed to be effective on 1 April 2019. The financial year that we are dealing with is the financial year that ended on 30 June 2019. So as the year was ending, we already had authority to apply the amended act 2 months earlier than the year had ended. And so it was clear that there was no way we are going to subject all of the municipalities to the application of the amended provisions of the Public Audit Act. So we had already determined that we are going to do 9 municipalities as an initial phase-in of the application of the enhanced powers of the Auditor-General. And as you know, these powers are about saying when an auditor identifies a material irregularity in an audit of financial statements, that particular material irregularity must be brought to the attention of the accounting officer. The accounting officer will be given reasonable time to process any corrective steps that are required in order to fix that material irregularity. And if that fails after the passage of time, which is driven by the regulations to the Public Audit Act, then the Auditor General is also ultimately empowered to consider issuing a certificate of debt as a way of recovering that money which has been lost through the identification of a material irregularity. So in this instance, we applied this particular new provision, as I said, on a limited scale to 9 different municipalities. And for purposes of this report that you are submitting, we've already identified some material irregularities in a couple of the municipalities that we selected. And on the screen there, you will see that there were instances where there were payments for goods or services not received. According to the definition of a material irregularity, this falls squarely within that particular definition. There were instances where assets, I spoke about assets which are sitting at about 300 odd and even more billion in local government, which were not safeguarded, resulting in theft and vandalism of these assets. And you will note that if you look at section 62 of the MFMA, among other responsibilities of an accounting officer, is to safeguard or to put measures in place to safeguard the assets of the institution. And there were instances where there was unfair procurement leading to overprices, a particular instance, and then a quantified amount. So what is happening to these issues? As we concluded the audits, we then passed them on with a written note to the accounting officers to address these matters and give us feedback on how they have been fixed. We are now obviously in a period where we were not able to promptly follow up on them because of lockdown, but the process continues. We continue to go back to them and we will continue to report on them so that ultimately if we get to a point where we need to consider issuing a certificate of debt, that will be taken care of through the system in the office. So the long and short of the feedback on the processes of material irregularities is that we have started implementing. The 9 municipalities that were selected in the 2019 year are going to be even more municipalities in the year that ended yesterday. So as soon as we commence with the audit in the next 2 to 3 months, we will be applying the new enhanced definition of material irregularity on the accounts of a significant number of municipalities, because we are getting to phase 2 now. Our teams have been trained to detect a lot of these transactions, and so the population of municipalities that are going to be subject to this is even going to be much bigger come the next year. I'm sure at some point the Deputy AG will remind us as to the extent of municipalities that we have identified, but I know that in some provinces there will be 7 municipalities subjected to this scrutiny, and so the number will grow. But when you look at the same report a year later, you'll probably have volumes of information indicating that these are the material irregularities identified, these are the steps that have been taken to fix them if they were successful, or if they were not successful, this is the route that the audit office is pursuing, which will ultimately end at a point whether we issue a certificate of debt in respect to whatever losses have been clearly identified in the audit. So like all new instruments that have been strengthened in legislation, we think that this one is probably one of the quickest that has come on stream, because we've already trained the staff across the country, we've already put in place processes that are going to be followed, and we have also finally now put in place the natural justice provisions that are there in the amended Public Audit Act, so that anybody who is caught with a possible certificate of debt will have a legal recourse to have their side of the story heard. And hence, in the office, we've already instituted an independent committee on material irregularities, which will be the final arbiter of those matters before they are finally signed off at the level of the Auditor-General. So some progress has been made there. And though we may be reporting in 2020 that we've now got a heightened level of risk in this area, we are confident that when you have proactive engagement with material irregularities in an audit, sometimes that intervention shifts the attitude and the approach of people handling the finances a bit. Then the other part which we felt was important also, because somebody is going to ask, but what other solutions are there? We have put in place and communicated with all the respective leadership that we engaged with up to this point, the necessity for all of the municipalities as well as all of local government to begin to embrace the concept of preventative controls. Now, preventative controls are the tools at the disposal of management of an entity, because it is the budget in the hands of that particular management that enables the projects of a municipality to be carried out effectively and efficiently. And among these, when we look at the financial discipline side of things, you will find a lot of these controls are lacking in supply chain management area in bigger numbers, hence the 32 billion that we flighted for irregular expenditure. You'll find a lot of them, as I spoke in some of the provinces, contract management continues to suffer, but there are preventative controls that are put in place to prevent contracts from being awarded without due process, for contracts that may not be needed to find ways to stop them. But there are many areas of payments as well that are a leakage in many municipalities, where payments and the requisite documentation is never always available for the people who must first approve and authorize it, let alone it being available for scrutiny by external auditors when they need to have a look at the payments being made. But also on the employee processes and payroll, I mean, some of the preventative controls are about why does this particular district have so many staff members on its payroll when its actual responsibilities are even far less than a municipality's responsibilities. These are some of the questions that we think, as part of a preventative control, is something that must happen at the coalface by management before the auditors come afterwards to ask the same questions, because these are the type of issues that prevent irregularities from happening. So if we can make sure that local government embraces this principle, and our teams have already started interacting with many municipalities, but it takes a while before this becomes an endemic reality of these institutions. I spoke about assets and liabilities management, and one of the things that we flag in this report is that every year municipalities produce financial statements because the law requires them to do so. But when we look at these financial statements and we look at the assets and liabilities that sit on these financial statements, in most instances in some municipalities, they do not quite know even the physical location of some of these assets. And we think that there's a big need for the ability to manage assets to be ramped up, because it is through those assets that they deliver services, but it is also through those assets that they will earn some additional income. Part of this, for example, is immovable assets in the form of buildings. If a municipality owns a particular building, but there's some crowd that uses it for other activities, but the municipality carries that asset in its books, it keeps the maintenance of the asset, but it doesn't enjoy the benefits coming out of that asset. And then the bigger one as well is the revenue management. I think we've seen how the write-down of the revenue raised in municipalities has affected their ability to have access to cash. And we think that there are proactive steps that need to be taken to make sure that the preventative control discipline around revenue management is also given priority. So a lot of these preventative controls, as I said, in order for them to find resonance in an institution, they require senior management. They require the accounting officer or the accounting authority. They require internal audit as well as the audit committee. But when we did an assessment of the effectiveness of these levels of management within local government at a global level, we found that at the managerial and leadership level, the front line, there are some significant weaknesses when it comes to the level of assurance that auditors get from that. So once that first layer is weak, then nothing that can be helped or municipal councils. So the slide on there is a reflection of the extent to which the controls at management level have been found to be weak in a number of areas. Hence, even financial statements in some municipalities get submitted to consultants, and then the consultants are expected to answer all the questions from the auditors as if the consultants had accountability for the activities of the institution. And we find there's a lot of this particular abdication of responsibility when staff in the institution is not able to themselves. And then I think I'm getting to the tail end of this. and I think when we look at where to from here, we just thought we'll favor you with a little quote at the end in respect to what does this all add up to. And I guess we move from the premise that around all of us, I'm sure there are many people that would prefer not to really do any work for as long as they know that they are going to continue to get something, whether they get it via a contract, whether they get it via employment, whether they are in the employ but they are not really producing any of the stuff that is required of them. We know that in any system, in any society, we'll always find people who do not really want to do that work. But unfortunately, people like those always have an upper hand when in our system we lack strong leadership. And I think the overall essence of these audit outcomes is that there's a lot that can be saved. There's a lot that is sitting in the undesirable hands from a control and management point of view. But for as long as we do not exercise good and strong leadership in making sure that those people who really do not want to work shall not have an upper hand around here. And I think that is the key message that we would like to leave with these audit outcomes, to say that it is still within the powers of many of the people in the leadership of local government to effect the required changes, because the amounts might look not that big, but all economic activity and economic opportunities in our country are created and run from all these towns that we are reporting on. And we think that that's probably one of the key takeaways here, to say that strong leadership will probably begin the journey of turning around what we often observe for the last 10 or 15 years. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, AG. Before I go to the AG's guests, there was a clarification that you wanted from the AG. She'll do that. After that, Deputy Minister, and then Menka Dimeng afterwards for your messages.
Thank you, Africa. Good morning. I confirm that there will be 57 auditees subjected to the next phase of implementing the Public Audit Act as amended. 56 municipalities plus one entity, so that'll be 57 auditees. That's a significant ramp up from the 9 that we dealt with in the previous financial year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Africa, Deputy President of SALGAN. Also to acknowledge the honorable members in Parliament, Honorable Nyambi and Somyo. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that the presentation from the AG has been quite comprehensive in depicting the current situation with regards to audit outcomes at a local government level. So I'm not going to try and repeat the points that have been raised by the AG, but just to take, or rather to raise a few takeaway points. Not in a comprehensive way, because the AG has been quite comprehensive in his presentation. The first, I think, is in the way in which the AG kind of analyzes in the title of the presentation some of the issues that are quite fundamental to what needs to be addressed and attended to. The first is a set of systemic issues that we need to resolve. So the reality and recognition of the fact that there are fiscal constraints, they do limit the extent to which local government is able to undertake its responsibility, suggests that in fact it is equally important for us to develop the requisite policy, institutional and financial tools to address those systemic constraints and limitations in local government. That notwithstanding, I think is the twin message that says that it should not excuse the lapses that have been witnessed and observed by the AG and as presented today. And some of these lapses are indeed governance lapses and governance issues that emerge in the municipal environment in the country. And some of these are administrative and control issues, addressing issues of management, administration, and control within the system. So the one level is a fundamentally political task about oversight and leadership with regards to what needs to happen. And that, to a large extent, is where the governance issues are located. But indeed, there are the administrative and management issues that also require attention in terms of the quality of people recruited into the system, accountability in the system, but also controls in the local government system. So I think for me, those are key takeaway points. The second point is a matter that I should say AG, we have been pondering and debating in COCTA together with our colleagues in Treasury, which is the fact that we've invested significantly in assets in the country to develop infrastructure and provide services to the people of this country. And local government is crucial to the provision of those services, whether it is electricity, water, sanitation, roads, stormwater, public parks, and so on. Local government is crucial in the provision of those services. So we celebrate in many ways as a country the extent to which we have reduced backlogs with regards to access to some of these services. But the reality is these services require repairs and maintenance. So we haven't matched the investments in infrastructure with our ability to maintain this infrastructure so that it's able to reach its logical lifespan, or at least the design lifespan of the infrastructure is not always realized because of low levels of repairs and maintenance. And I was saying that part of what we have been discussing and in fact have agreed as a department is that we need to ensure that a portion of the capital grants provided to local government, municipal infrastructure grant, as an example, we need to apportion a percentage of that. You can't take away from the responsibility of the grant, which is to provide infrastructure, but can you at least take a percentage, up to 5 to 8% of that, and say that this is dedicated to repairs and maintenance? In that way, you begin to address the problem that is being raised. Of course, it doesn't respond to the entire issue, because this is the extent to which, as government, we're saying we should be able to utilize the grants that we provide to local government to address issues of repairs and maintenance. But that doesn't absolve the municipalities themselves from assuming responsibility for budgeting for repairs and maintenance. So I thought it's an important issue that we shouldn't lose sight of, because it is a significant issue with regard to ensuring that the lifespan of assets is actually maintained. I think there is no doubt that in terms of the trends indicated by the Auditor-General, we should be concerned, and we should essentially roll up our sleeves and focus on the task. And the task at hand is to ensure that we address these challenges. Part of what we discussed before the lockdown period with the Auditor-General and the Minister of COGTA was to undertake a roadshow to all the provinces, and by extension to all the municipalities in the country. But the roadshow shouldn't be a ceremonial roadshow, if I may. It shouldn't be a roadshow where we go and say, well, we're exercising oversight, are you doing your job, and so on. The idea of this roadshow is that we should be able to drill down to what is the root cause of the problem and how do we address it per district, per municipality, so that we can begin to ensure that these matters receive our attention. Because we can't continue saying, at least as national government, and indeed including provincial governments, we can't continue saying we are concerned about the situation. We must say, what action do we take, working with the Office of the Auditor-General, working with provincial government, working with the South African Local Government Association, to ensure that these problems are addressed in a very systematic and structured way, and we can progressively realize the objectives of ensuring that we achieve clean audits in the municipal environment. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Deputy Minister. Menka Dimeng, after that, Honorable Somyo and Honorable Nyambi online.
Say possibly there is a light where all of us can learn, because there are pockets of excellence, minor as they may be. But AG, your report is deeply concerning. It shows continuous regression in terms of the audit outcomes within the sector. It critically shows that there are serious setbacks towards achieving the vision that government had set itself of being a departmental and a developmental local government, which was built on pillars of clean governance and accountability. The audit findings clearly shows that there's a lack of accountability. We can't run away from that. And there's a lack of consequence management in municipal leadership, which we have to take responsibility and accountability for. And that is what our presence is about this morning, is to say we would want to be responsible as a local government sector, but as also the leadership of municipalities, to say that we would want to turn the situation around where accountability and a good governance and clean governance is realized at the local government sector. So this picture before us can only change if at a management level and at a leadership level we are held accountable to ensure that we strengthen our resolve of extracting accountability using the existing levers provided in our legislation. I think the AG was very articulate that the legislation does provide clear-cut measures of what needs to be done and how we need to do them at municipal leadership level, but there's lack thereof. And I think we suggest as SALGA that clear extracting of accountability with regard to that needs to be done. A consoling factor is that also as a National Executive Committee, we met on the 18th of June, Auditor General, after you have presented to us. We decided on 4 fundamental issues that we will start doing as a executive committee. 1, to communicate directly with all the mayors and accounting officers, not only to the 9 that we have indicated, but to all municipalities who have transgressed in terms of the relevant legislation to demand accountability. And as the NEC will monitor this on a quarterly basis, and will also carry a skills audit to look clearly into the area of consultants which we have looked into. If a municipality has a CFO, why do we still utilize, and the staff of finance is fully complemented, why do we still utilize consultants? If not, what are the challenges those positions are not filled, and what could be done? And that assessment will then be able to give us a clear picture and an indication of what are the steps of building a capacity within municipalities where we think it may be needed. Also, this will go into a full extent. We are done training on MPEX, but it does, from your report, indicates that we may need to go back there again and be able to assist our councillors who sit in our municipal public audit accounts committees, to assist them to be able to understand the roles and responsibilities, but also to be held accountable of the area that they were supposed to be. So it will be part of what Bullet 1 was dealing with. Senior managers must also be subjected to professional bodies. In fact, it's a part we have started with also. If you are a chartered accountant, there's SAICA. What are we going to do, for example, in terms of requesting professional bodies in the field to assist us to oversee, but also to help us to oversee their members and also hold them accountable? I think that was the starting point, but a multidisciplinary audit steering committee consisting of SALGA, National Treasury, and COCTA has been formed to already monitor this implementation, as I've said, in a quarter basis. And we are hopeful that the municipal audit response plans that will be developed, monitored, will also assist in the financial year that is kicking in today, actually, a new financial year. And we are hopeful that the results that will come as we will move to the 1920 audit will be better. The implementation of this steering committee is informed largely by Section 216 of the Constitution, which says we could also be able to withhold equitable share in order to address financial misconduct in municipalities. Much as it could be used as a last measure, but we need to be able to move towards that rim where the AG makes an example that in one municipality, it will be a disclaimer for 8 years, and in year 9, we still have not done anything, even to an extent of forcing compliance and enforcing Section 216 of the Constitution. So we would want the committee, as it do these reviews on a quarter basis, begin to say, is there a root and seriousness in a particular municipality, or we'll have to look into discussions of how best could we release the funds to these municipalities while enforcing compliance. If we don't do that, the indication is that the deteriorating financial health status of municipalities will continue, and this will put the difficulties to our communities who deservedly are supposed to be receiving services that is meant out to come out of the funds that are allocated. I think in short, AG, I could say that we are willing and we would want to be partners in ensuring that we claim the sphere back, we claim accountability and good governance. As your report states, that municipalities, as I quote you, render services and deliver goods to consumers with the expectation that they need to be paid back. However, there's a growing trend of established business and households that do not pay. But if you also look back into this, you realize that there is now consumer trust deficit, because people feel we can't pay municipalities because they can't properly account. So if we don't fix this, we remain in a vicious circle They receive the services. They are not really convinced on whether they have to pay for them. The Deputy Minister says we have done them, we have not maintaining them properly. So the cycle continues, and the trust deficit, we experience it on a day-to-day. Until we hold hands and we become accountable and ensure that we run a sphere that is favorable and treat its communities better, we will struggle. And we are here to commit to that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mayor. We'll connect to Honorable Somyo, after that Honorable Nyambi.
Our municipalities, the very critical sphere of government, a government around the corner, where everything matters, where our communities, when they don't have water, they would cry and get closer to them. And they were exposed to how they spend what they have. How they misspend what they have, how they fail to observe regulatory environment in as far as the supply chain is concerned. And in detail, the Auditor-General has carried painfully how the country's fiscal is exposed at the local government level. You would imagine, just at this time, when we're exposed to this pandemic, when the Department of Water, human supplements, had to run around to procure the services that would at least assist our own communities to have water as a primary source. And unfortunately, those municipalities who have been charged with that responsibility, how they have carried that task with little observance of ensuring that there is durable infrastructure for such services. You see, the Auditor-General has outlined that to us, and that exposure runs deep to what do we have to do as the parliamentary committee in this instance, where would worry for some time when the Auditor-General was exposed into environment which was not so safe to audit the books of various municipalities. Were pleased this time around that at least there is an indication that there has been less of that exposure into risk, and therefore the audit teams right around the country could fulfill their role. We were at a very displeasure when we had to meet a number of municipalities who were allegedly within that kind of an activity. But let's appreciate that at least there has been a sound observance of allowing the Auditor-General to have a look into such books. What as well disturbs us the most is that a number of municipalities would, you see, not fail to spend too much on the audit process and fail to ensure that when they procure services, when they deal with these management controls, they would ensure that the skills that are necessary are in place. But at the tail end, when they had to account, they would engage a number of service providers as consultants to look into their books and to present such to the general, something which I think should be discouraged so much, because there is no need for expense at that stage if the requisite skill is somewhat attained by municipalities in various instances. I think we have to appreciate the fact that there are those municipalities who don't fail to do good to observe such controls, as the Auditor-General has outlined, that is more critical to ensure that you internalize such controls, you ensure that they are finding part of your own systems, so that the breakage should not be by the fact that one officer is not present, another officer is engaged, and therefore such controls must be observed. If you have internalized them, if you have found them within your own systems, it's much better to ensure that you run and rally behind such. It's a situation which is unbearable when you find out that where there is a sense of stability, both politically and administratively, there are better outcomes. And where there is instability, glaringly, you would see that the outcomes and the scrutiny fails to derive the best in as far as the outcomes are concerned. So it's a call to us, to both the local government and the provinces, to take charge of the environment. The Auditor-General has outlined how Limpopo has improved because the Premier of the province committed himself to assist that background. And we call on the highest office in these various provinces to follow suit to ensure that at least they safeguard the role of accountability, good governance, and looking into the stable environment in as far as these municipalities are concerned. As a committee, we are going to find time with the Auditor-General to look into detail as to how can we at best begin to influence a trend of both good governance and accountability to the local sphere of government. We're pleased to hear from SALGA that there's been a call by them to ensure that various leaders of various municipalities would be made to adhere to these kinds of accountability protocols at all times. There's no way that the country would have all these spheres of government and insist that the actual observance of a key legal parameters, whether they are talking about procurement, whether they are talking about governance, whether they are talking about the systems that pertain to overall performance in the local government overall, must be observed at all times. We must all work together to ensure that these things happen. We hope that at least what the President has outlined in improving performance at local government level as a strategic call of looking into the district model would as well to work well to assist in the environment of accountability. There's no need that we should run around even on the meager resources that we have. Let us ensure that we observe the best of models of accounting and such, and be able to attain the best results overall. So we really appreciate what the Auditor-General does and the teams which are there, and the limits in terms of the current audit environment to observe the amendments in as far as the Public Audit Act, so that the numbers which are sitting at 9 currently improved to more than 50 would have loved to see all municipalities subjected to such over time. So our discussions with the Auditor-General would work around those areas, because if irregularities amount to more than 30 billion rand in as far as the financial terms are concerned. And we'll look into the better way of improving performance around such. We must increase our basis to audit a number of such municipalities who continue to work towards regularity over time, looking into the record of accountability. Thank you very much, Auditor-General, for the outcomes.
Thanks, Chairperson. We'll take on to the questions we have received.
Thanks, Chairperson. We have few questions on the WhatsApp groups. I'll start with Claudia Milovic from Business Day, who has about 3 questions. The first one, what is the impact on municipalities if the audit outcomes continue to regress over the next few years, as has been seen consistently over the past few years? The second one from Claudia is, and what is the AG's view on the fact that the situation is not improving? What is the most crucial thing that has to be done to fix the state of municipal finances? How do we get the right hands at the till, and is it possible to turn the situation around without extreme changes to the way both political office bearers and municipal officials act? We also have questions from Kulekani Magubani from Fin24. To what extent, if any, financial management standards failing? The third set of questions is from Trudy Dutoit from Sports Trader. Are there any known cases where action had been taken against the municipal officials who have been responsible for frequent irregularities in their financial statements? We also have a set of questions from Talia Holmes, who's from News 24. Could you please share with us the municipality or the area where unfair procurement with inflated pricing took place? The second one from Talia, will there be any sort of cap on spending on financial consultants for those municipalities that spend heavily on these service providers and yet saw no material improvements in their audit outcomes? What other solutions will be recommended to these municipalities for improving their financial performances?
All right, let me start with the first few questions from Claudia. There's one about the impact of outcomes if municipalities regress, or rather if outcomes regress over the years, what will be the impact on the municipality? I think if you look at the combination of what we often promote, and that is to deploy internal controls in a financial management environment, that discipline of having proper financial controls helps the municipality prepare for rainy days as well. Because when they've got their hand around what money goes for what project, what sort of pricing tests do they perform when they pay for goods and services, if they've got that discipline, they also help the municipality from falling into hard times in the future. So a consistent regression of audit outcomes is an indication of a slippage in the controls, whose final consequence could be to deliver a financial health risk. So the direct answer is, the lesser you are effective in controlling your resources over time, the closer you get to bankruptcy. And I think if you look at many of the municipalities that we have analyzed in a number of those 7 provinces, you know what has happened? Because they have not applied proper control, many of them, they run out of cash. And to pay for the things that they did last year, they tend to wait for the equitable share of this year. Remember, the equitable share of this year was ring-fenced for the things that must happen this year. Not to pay for things that you ought to have paid for last year, but because you had too much latitude to divert the money away from what was intended to something else. Then you are short. And that is the ultimate. When your controls are not in place, your financial health risk is going to accelerate you to a point where you are no longer even able to pay for your staff. It starts there. The minute you begin to find difficulty in paying for your staff, because you will discover that in previous years where you had to save the money, you never did. You broke every single internal control. You allowed for every contract to be signed up, but there was no rigor in managing the outflow of cash in order for you to survive rainy days. So I think that is really one of the things that needs to be taken into account, that these controls are not just those mere procedures that the Auditor General often asks for. They have got an inherent risk of preventing a downward spiral when it comes to the financial fortunes if your environment is controlled properly. Because a properly controlled environment will know the extent of the cash flow needs that it has over the next 6 months. It will know the things that it wished it could procure, but decides to not procure them because they will put unnecessary pressure on their resources. That's what's the value of these controls, and that's what sometimes they will result in if they are not properly observed. And what should be done to change this around? I think, Mengadimeng, I'll leave that part for you. I think it's part of the institutional mechanisms that you spoke to earlier on. Maybe let me just tackle the issue Kulegane raised regarding the PAA amendments. The PAA amendments, when they came into an environment where they were adding up to other initiatives that were already on the go. But because it's a demanding process on its own, it was not easy for us when it was approved last year to begin to get out and do the amendment of the Public Audit Act tests everywhere. But we believe that it will help, especially if you look at local government now. We're talking about, rather than the 9 that we selected initially, we're talking about 56 thereabout, which means that there will be a huge population of municipalities now to that extent that will be subjected to these particular provisions. What these provisions do, which prior to their pronouncement was not happening. In the past, before these amendments, we used to audit, identify the items that we report on, including the irregular expenditures, leave it in the hands of an accounting officer to figure out the solution that needs to be put in place. Some of those things have been sitting as work in progress for years without being fixed. The new amendment, when it came into being, and what it's going to mean 2 things. It's going to mean that you do not have the luxury to sit around with a audit recommendation within a specified period and not implement it. And if you don't implement it, and you are given sufficient time to find ways to correct that which was going wrong, then the auditors are going to come closer to you now to say that maybe you need to make good that which has been lost by the system on the back of not gearing up on those systems of internal control. So we do think that it will help, but in order for it to help, it cannot come alone, because auditors will come and do the scrutiny of the books as they should, and we are encouraged by the appetite of the leadership, because the leadership, as we are interacting with them across all these provinces, were insisting that it will help if we can accelerate the implementation of this PAA amendment, which means that they are signing up as well to take the necessary steps that will arise from that process. Because if somebody is sitting as a chief financial officer and all the transactions get processed through him or her and they result in material irregularities, despite the fact that there's a chief financial officer and a department, we as auditors can't act on that department. We've got to look to the council when we present our material irregularity report and say, Council, here is our recommendation with regards to the steps that you must take to fix that finance department. Firstly, the person heading that finance department, if that is what comes out of the material irregularity analysis, has not necessarily been trained technically in the discipline of financial management, then it might just be a waste of time to continue that person in that job, because all others in other departments know how to process transactions in the system. If the one who's supposed to exercise proper oversight over money is not properly trained, maybe there could be an answer there to say that we need someone else to head the finance department. Because if this is a bridge for the transactions of external parties as well as those that are internally generated, if you don't remove that person, then you're not protected. And I think there are a variety of answers that will come when we interact with the leadership. And I think that they will also see for themselves when certain things are happening regardless of commitments being made. So I think that will be the key one as far as the PAA amendment is concerned. There are a couple of cases of known officials who have transgressed in a number of municipalities that we have followed, particularly in some media. I remember one case in Oudtshoorn, for example, where a municipal manager linked to, if you look at the case was drawing attention to specific provisions of the Municipal Finance Management Act transgressions, which got this particular individual to have to answer in a court. But as we know it, the reality is that those are exceptional situations where you find many of these officials having to answer for the transgressions. But for the greater part, in a number of other municipalities, certain investigations start, and because of issues of instability and other related matters, you never see that particular investigation to its conclusion. And that particular effort is wasted because nothing really happens when you don't conclude on the entire investigation. Let me hand over to you, Mengadimeng, to deal with that other one.
Thank you very much, AG. Claudia, I have articulated 4 areas which we will start with to enforce accountability, which were directly emanating from the presentation of the AG in trying to respond to how we will, in his concluding remarks now, he spoke about how will council be brought to a realization of what has transpired and accountability being sought. 2, the overseeing of what the audit plans that will be developed by municipalities is supposed to be followed through. In case that does not happen, we are suggesting to National Treasury that they must look into implementing Section 216 of the Constitution, which empowers them to say until the municipality has begun to deal with corrective measures of what have been identified by the Auditor-General, their equitable share must be withheld. And the plan must be clear, proper, followed through, and provinces will be assisting in this. The subjecting what the AG also has spoken about in terms of assessment of skills that is currently there in those municipalities. Can we retrain? Is that skill possessed at all, so that we are able to say accountability and recurring of issues that have already been determined does not happen again. So it's a basket type of interventions that will force us as municipalities to be accountable for the funds that we are allocated. It's not a one silver bullet. Unfortunately, it's pocket of challenges that we have at municipal level. Some are skills related, some are where systems are deliberately ignored and action or consequences have to be taken. Some is capacity, where you will have to capacitate your MPECs, for example, to be able to play proper oversight and counsel to hold responsible the officials whom they employ to be able to ensure that accountability happens. I think that's what we will be able to do. The same issue which Talia raises on consultants, it's embedded on the assessment of what do we have. I articulated it earlier on. I said, if you do this assessment, you will exactly know. You zoom into this municipality individually, 257 of them, what is happening in your staff complement in finance? Do you have a chief financial officer? Yes. Why are you utilizing a consultant? What is the value of the consultant? What are we going to bring in which will be developmental as we cut out the utilization of consultants? As the AG has indicated, in their verification, there was very little value that was derived by municipalities from the utilization of consultants. But we may also have to understand that, for example, the AG make an example of a municipality in Northern Cape where they are unable to attract the skill which is supposed to assist them to make or compile proper annual financial statement. So we will have to find a mixed bucket of issues on how we could be able to offer solutions around of how we could be able to resolve the different issues that are happening or challenges that are faced by municipalities. Thank you, Africa.
So if I may just close one point which the chair has raised on the consultants' spend. You know, if you look at the general report, and I'll just refer you to page 122 of the report once you are able to get to it. We've got a schedule in each of the 9 provinces, like I said, which is a schedule of consulting costs for accounting, financial and asset management, and other internal control services rendered. Now, let's just take an example in light of the question that you raised, where you asked what were the other solutions that could be proposed in terms of this consulting expenditure. Maybe on that page 122, if you look at a municipality number 13, and that is Madibeng in the Northwest. Madibeng, according to its audit opinion, is disclaimed. Madibeng was disclaimed for the last 4 years, every single year. Disclaimed, meaning that the auditors are not able to arrive at an audit opinion because the books were messy. This is now a situation that had obtained in the last 4 years consecutively. We are now in 2018-2019, which is year 5. Madibeng has got a budget in its finance department of 33.6 million for the year. This is a budget for the people who are employed to carry out financial management activities. So that's the total finance department salary according to the financial statements. But Madibeng for this year attracted consultants to come and help them in the finance department for an amount in total of 35.4 million. An amount paid to the consultants which is even higher than the total salary budget of the finance department. Now the question that we are raising here is leadership of the institution. Have a look at what this is about. Why is it that even your finance department is costing less than is being paid to this third-party external service provider who may have been providing this service even in the previous 4 years where you were none the wiser about the issues of transparency of financial management. Here comes another bill of 35.4 million towards an external service provider. And the questions that we are flagging with this are, maybe you can do without that expenditure if you control it at leadership level, because you already have a history of 4 years of getting the same result anyway. Nobody ever comes out wiser in Madibeng as to what is happening to the transparent management of your finances. But surely should you be happy to pay an extra 35 million rand towards somebody who's going to tell you nothing again? I think that is the critical question, and it's a leadership question. It's a question that the people that are in council at Madibeng ought to answer. So that the next time around when the CFO wants to engage the services of an external service provider, there can first be a conversation about it and an understanding as to what is it that you are going to pay for this thing. And maybe there can also be an upper limit, because the leadership of a council can do that and say, we are already budgeting 33.6 million for staff in your department. This year, you are allowed to spend up to X amount if you need the services of an external service provider. So that you don't come up at the end of the financial year and you've got a huge bill like this, but you know, it's like taking your car for a service and then you have to tow it back after you spend on the service of this vehicle. So that's the critical issue. It's not about the Auditor General. There's no appetite for consultants. The point is, we are all required to handle our finances and our activities in the public sector efficiently, economically, and effectively. And this is one of the key tests just in this isolated area. I'm not even talking about other services, just this one, which is about financial control. And this is, Madibeng is in Brits. It's not in a place where you can find other people that can identify which one is a debit, which one is a credit, before they commit themselves to an entry in their accounting records. Surely you can. Firestone and other people operate from there, which means that for them to run their businesses, they are able to do that. Agriculture businesses, tourism businesses, it's not far from Pretoria. Thank you.
Thanks. Maybe to pick up on the point that both SALGA President and AG raised, the concluding point of the AG, with regard to consultants, I think that the issue that becomes very evident is about the effective deployment of resources. So what's become evident from the report of the AG is that instead of deploying the resources in addressing the controls in the municipality, what tends to happen is the resources are deployed to sort out the reporting and preparing the financial statements. Now, if the controls are wrong, then preparing the statements is not going to solve your problem. You have to sort out the controls, which makes it easier to deal with reporting. And I think that's where the disjuncture is. It's about the effective deployment of resources to ensure that you can achieve the intended results. And the intended results are not only to submit annual financial statements, but to ensure that they are corroborated by the necessary evidence and records of controls and accountability in the system. The other point I thought I should raise is a question that was raised by Claudia. Is it possible to change? My opinion is it is possible to change. We do have evidence in the country of municipalities that have moved from adverse opinions and disclaimers to the other side of unqualified audit. So it is possible to change. It requires focused effort by all that are involved, in particular the leadership of the municipality at both the political and administrative level, to ensure that we are able to achieve these objectives. Of course, this has to come with the requisite support from all the other parties, provincial and national government, and our colleagues in the South African Local Government Association. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. I've got two questions from Ishmael from Mamelodi East to the panel. The first one is, what will be the best solution to correct the human behavior which has been causing corruption for the many years in order to realize value for money across public institutions? And the second question is, how best can public representatives and government officials be trained to understand their responsibilities in all our institutions? Yes. There's two more questions on the one side. So two more questions from Armenia in Cape Town. The one is, when are we going to see more police visibility at street level to stop the crime at grassroots level? And the other one, directed to Salga, is what is Salga's role in all of this? They seem to be surprised, like all of us, when the AG tables the reports. They are the ground. They are on the ground as watchdogs. Can they not deploy representatives to follow up and clean up? Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson. We have two set of questions from Atandiwe from the Mail and Guardian. Why are we still battling to get the use of consultants under control? The second one, municipalities have spent over 1 billion rands on consultants to assist in financial statement preparations, yet 59% of statements submitted for auditing included material misstatements in areas in which consultants did work. Would this not form part of material irregularities? And the last set of questions is from Vuyani Green, SABC News. The first one, what causes these audit outcomes to regress? Is it due to incompetence, corruption, or both? And lastly, what is the AG's view regarding the recent decision by the Western Cape High Court, which set aside his office audit opinion relating to a Western Cape department? Is his office appealing that decision? That's all. Thank you, Chairperson.
Sakana, can you tackle the one on the best solution to correct human behavior? And I guess the others, Deputy Minister, the training intervention, maybe you can help with that one. I don't know who has competencies on the police visibilities in the street, but I'm sure it's one that I can leave in your hands, Deputy Minister, please. Salga role, that was clear. So I think all of us have got bits and pieces of things to speak about. I'll tackle the others in terms of the thing when I come back afterwards. Maybe Menkati Mengi, do you want to start with your part, and then we go to Deputy AG, Deputy Minister, and then I'll wrap up with the last bit, including the Western Cape High Court stuff.
Thank you very much. I think the question came from Amelia. We are not watchdogs, I think, for starters. We are there to provide support to municipalities' capacity development and to advocate for a better developmental local government sphere. But we are equally not surprised because we are in the sphere and we have come up with tangible solutions. I think it's for the first time where it comes from the sector, where we are saying to local government, can you enforce us under Section 216? In the past 7 years, AG, you have been here, I don't think you have heard it. So we are saying we'd hold the money, National Treasury, hold us accountable so that we are able to deliver what the money is purported to do. So that's not being a surprise. I think it's about taking tangible action, which the legislation allows. So in my opening statement, I did indicate that it's a regression which clearly indicates that there's poor leadership, there's poor management, there's poor consequence management processes that will assist municipalities, both in a form of council and in a form of administration, to take responsibility of what transpires in 257 municipalities in a country. We offer support. I indicated, for example, that of the 257 municipalities in the past financial year, we've trained around 109 impacts. So it means we need to be able to go back and say, are we going to realize the value of the training that we have had? But it also has got to do with Are you training somebody who's trainable? Someone who understands what he or she is supposed to do? Because yes, training, you could attend for 10 days, you leave, but do you understand? Do you have the capacity and the capability to be able to do what you are intended to do in council? But bold action is coming. We involve ourselves as SALGA in both provincial level and the national level to resolve problems at municipalities and take accountability on what we're supposed to do. I think it will change. The situation will change. We are committed to making sure that the situation change. Thank you very much. I think that was my part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll go next. The question was about how do you change human behavior? How do you correct human behavior? To my mind, there are three things. The first one is people need to be aware of what the rules are. Let's make sure that people are acutely aware of what the expectations are as they execute their jobs. The second one is to build the key internal controls that will help you prevent people from flouting the rules, that will help you detect things going wrong quickly and correct them. And if you have a system like that, what happens is if somebody knows that the rules are this, they'll also know that if they don't play within those rules, they will get caught. And then the third thing is hold them accountable. So if somebody knows what the rules are and you have the ability to detect, to prevent first of all, but to detect quickly what's happened that's gone wrong, you must hold them accountable, because if somebody knows that they will get caught, and if they get caught, something will happen, then it acts as an important deterrent from people doing that which is inconsistent with expectations. So I do believe that you change human behavior by making sure people know what they're supposed to do, have the rules clearly established. Number two, have a system of control that helps you prevent things going wrong and detect them if they should go wrong so that you can act. And then the third thing, we must act. We must implement consequences so that there's a culture that drives more compliance than not. People tend to do wrong when they know that if they get caught, nothing will happen. And people tend to act within the rules if they know that if they get caught, there will be consequences that are attached to them. Thank you.
Thanks once again. Maybe I'll match the questions that were raised by Vuyan and Ishmael, and not be too comprehensive, but make a few examples. So what is the problem or cause as raised by Vuyan, and what are the possible solutions as raised by Ishmael? So of course there are systemic and structural issues. So you have instances where there is evidence that the control environment is inadequate. And what are we talking about? Records are not kept to be able to match what transactions municipalities enter into. Reports are not prepared timeously. There are lapses in the decision-making processes, so you can't always provide evidence that the decision that has been made necessarily is the most objective decision in terms of supply chain management processes and so on. So those structural issues and systemic issues require a systemic response. It's about how do you ensure that you deal with, if there are issues of whether it's IT systems, we need to ensure that the IT systems are put in place with the appropriate controls and accountability to the performance of those systems. If it is in relation to the performance of people and individuals, we need to ensure that appropriate action is taken if in fact there is evidence that the lapses are because people have deliberately made decisions that are not necessarily correct. If it is a capacity problem, then there are programs that we're undertaking both between ourselves as government and SALGA to improve the capacity of both political office bearers and administrators in the municipality. So you need to deal with the issues in relation to where it manifests. And then, of course, there are problems in relation to governance. How do you ensure that the governance systems in the municipality are adequate? Do you have the appropriate committees? Do you have an audit committee? Does it receive the requisite reports? Do you have the appropriate oversight mechanisms in council through a municipal public accounts committee, does it undertake its responsibility? So there are issues around governance and oversight that need to be resolved. Because when the appropriate governance structures hold people to account and makes the appropriate decisions, you can be able to achieve the requisite results. But if your governance systems are not adequate, if you don't receive the reports timelessly at an appropriate time for you to be able to make the right decisions about what corrective action needs to be taken, then you can't resolve the problem. So you have to resolve it through the discipline, almost at the most pedantic level of the discipline of, am I getting the report at the right level, at the right time, to enable a decision to be made about whether this is correct or not. And I think those issues are very important in addressing what are the root causes of the problems, but also what then relates to actually governance and the solutions to the problems that we're encountering. Can I comment on the matter of police? I think it's going to be a difficult question to answer. Of course, as government, there's been a collective decision that we need to improve the way in which the police function in relation to crime prevention and enhancing mechanisms of crime prevention through visibility. But I'm talking at it at a high level in relation to the direction that government has committed to take, but it would be difficult for me at this stage to kind of say, well, actually in relation to the deployment in Cape Town or in Johannesburg or in Madibeng has to be this, that, or the other. It's slightly more an area I'm not particularly a specialist in, if there's one that I'm a specialist in. Thank you.
No, thank you, GM. I'm sure we make an attempt at least on that one as well. Let me deal with the two remaining issues relating to why are we battling the use of consultants, and if after they have been engaged, we still end up with so many that have got material misstatements. I do think that this is an appropriate question to raise, particularly if one looks at the area of consulting services, because there's a wide area of discretion that is normally left in the hands of the people in the senior administration of a particular municipality to decide on some of these consulting services. And that's why we are insisting that, yes, don't take that discretion away, but let there be proper independent oversight over it. Because if I am a chief financial officer and I'm under pressure 2 months before the financial statements have to be submitted, and I go to the municipal manager and they make representations to council for me to engage the services of an external service provider because 2 or 3 staff members in the department are not around for whatever reason. If that process of procurement of the consulting skill is not properly managed, sometimes it comes into the environment when it was asked to come and fix the fixed asset register, which was initially meant to be a 2-month exercise. By the time they leave after 14 months, they probably have had to scratch around a couple of other areas outside of fixed assets. And that's what happens when external service providers are not properly controlled. So we do think that the hand of councils, together with municipal public accounts committees, needs to be a bit stronger in this area. And I guess the conversation should not be too technical. Well, of course, there are those things that people ask external service providers to come and help them with technically challenging issues. That's understandable. But there's got to be an understanding that these external service providers are not here forever. And I think that's the part that we want to highlight here, because also when they bring accounts that have got material misstatements, remember we are engaging the services of a highly trained group of people who are running their own business somewhere in town, a firm of accountants and a firm of auditors. you should expect from them at least people who have multiple years of experience dealing with putting together books of account, because that's what they do for a trade. Now, there are two things that often happen. If you gave them documents that don't make sense, they are unlikely to give you financial statements that make sense. That's the starting point. Now, the auditors are unlikely to make sense of the adjustments that the consultants made in the books, because oftentimes they find that the consultants are reversing the adjustments of the previous year's consultant, and now because they start not believing what that other consultant before them did. Now you obviously going to be entangled to this person who appears to know more than the one that you engaged last year. And they've got their own set of issues as well. Maybe they're not even going to give you a supporting document about this transaction because you never gave them that supporting document in the first place as an accounting officer. How do you expect them? The books will balance, as we often know in accounting. You can do everything you want, but the books will always balance when accountants are there. But it's in the scrutiny of the elements of the financial statements that you start seeing certain things here look like they've been force balanced. I'm not saying that accountants are trained to do that, but others take shortcuts. When they can't get the books to balance, they force balance them and hope that the auditors are not going to pick it up. Now, that's another area that the leadership of the institution ought to be presiding over as an area of oversight. If we have approved in council that you can go ahead with this extra expenditure that we didn't bargain for, we want to see the final product also. Because if the final product is a litany of findings and misstatements from the AG, then it means that we've not spent our money properly. Either their consultant could never have helped it, because the document that was never available is not suddenly going to become available just because there's a consultant. So I think the rigor around the management of this area of discretionary expenditure is possibly one of the key things that we would want to put our finger on, to say, let us be aware that there's a finance department that has got a fixed acceptable cost for the year for the various things that must happen. People must analyze revenue. They must sort out billings. They must reconcile the books. They must make sure that the things that are bought do indeed exist. So there may be people in finance department who really do not have the equivalent capacity of a chief financial officer. When you bring that person from outside, the point we're making is that there's got to be a rigorous process of making sure we manage that, because there are many municipalities in this report that are too small to justify the cost that they paid to an external service provider. And I think that is the key message for us. And then the last point regarding the Western Cape High Court, somewhere beginning of June, yes, we got this feedback that the High Court in the Western Cape, on a matter between ourselves and the Western Cape Department of Agriculture, had found against us on that particular matter. So we went back to look at what have we done. And we thoroughly studied the judgment already and have taken a decision that we are going to file a notice of leave to appeal that judgment, which step we already took yesterday to submit that notification. We believe there are a number of things that need to be sorted out in this particular matter. But thankfully also we're doing this with National Treasury, because it was a matter pertaining to issues of transparent reporting and all of that, as well as the accounting framework. We are not the custodian of the accounting framework. We test adherence to it. We attest to the accounting framework. So I think it's good that National Treasury will also pronounce their side of the matter, because in the initial case, it was just us dealing with the issue of the audit opinion. So effectively, having submitted our intention or notice to file an appeal yesterday, that notice effectively suspends the implementation of that 8th June judgment, which means The 2016-17 and 2017-18 audit reports of the Agriculture Department in the Western Cape remain unchanged until we have gone through that appeal process. So that's where the matter is. I'm not going to bore you with the technicalities of it, but we have studied and analyzed where certain things could be looked at in a different context when we apply ourselves to this, and we certainly will wait for that process to unfold. It's unfortunate because it's a matter, I'm sure when you pick it up in the public domain, had to do with some of the troubling issues of transparent reporting in financial statements. And when auditors take their view on certain matters, it obviously gets contested by those that feel they can't lose their clean audit and have something else. And I think we are picking up that matter in that context. So definitely the steps have been undertaken already to process it as of yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thanks, AG. Before you wrap up, I'm told one other thing is on the line. I'll give a short message and then you wrap up.
Thank you. Greetings to AG, Deputy AG, Minister of COGTA, Honorable Tau, and the President of SALGA, members of the media. It gives me pleasure to be part of this yet again profound session, as we have done in the past with the AG and his team. I'm delighted upfront to indicate that as an NCOP, we have been acquainted with the details of the report and have taken it upon ourselves to map up some of the ways we hope to further engage given our location and our distinctive mandate. In the last few days, on behalf of the 9 provinces, as the NCOP, we pick up some of the areas of concern and committed to undertake oversight in our close constituencies. I must indicate, though, that it's rather discomfort, as my colleagues have indicated, to learn of the regression in a lot of these municipalities. Sadly, the same question we have asked ourselves in the past continue to agitate us. It remains unclear why we are still not seeing the desired progress, why our oversight interventions are seemingly not yielding the results we desire. As the legislature, we must give an account as we continue to exercise oversight in the respective underperforming municipalities. As committees of the NCOP AG, we have a responsibility to interface with the outcomes that are being tabled today as we have tabled them. At least that oversight responsibility cannot be taken away even by the pandemic such as COVID-19. In our recent engagement as the permanent and special delegates, we agree that we have a responsibility to change the outlook of these outcomes, working with SALGA, and strongly believe that it is possible to achieve that as we slowly glance through the local elections. It will make sense to get to that period without commitment to change the political and financial landscape. Then we commit further to do just these 4 important things. The first one is we're going to process this report through our respective committees in the following parliamentary terms. We have already agreed that our committee's program will focus on all these audit outcomes, and will continue to cooperate with both the National Assembly and provincial committees to address negative audit outcomes of provincial sector departments through our oversight work. And will convene an annual local government week working with the President of SALGA, where different spheres converge and discuss pertinent issues such as performance of municipalities across the board. Equally important, relook at the best approach of dealing with same performance as in the previous years. It does not help to apply same methods and expect different results, as we have alluded to that, AG. Last but not least, continue to maintain a healthy and yet honest relationship with the Office of the AG and his team so that we continue to have meaningful engagement of what Parliament must look at even before the outcomes are tabled. But we agree with almost what the responses that we have tabled, AG, looking forward to the future engagement in making sure that we improve the situation. Thanks for being part of this very important, profound session, AG.
No, thank you very much, everybody, for attendance. It was our other attempt once more to demonstrate that these accounts, as they come, they are the pre-COVID-19 set of accounts. We obviously are now going to get busy in the next few months looking at the period that ended yesterday. So we are always encouraged by the kind of issues that you pick up with us. But we do want to anchor the point that it seems as we go forward, there's not really going to be a lot more going around. And if all of these disciplines can at least help us, all of us, to appreciate the fact that when financial statements are produced, they must mean something. They must mean that somebody in a particular municipality has a responsibility to know about the state of play of their water infrastructure assets, of their other assets that they are responsible for. So that as we pronounce on these audits, there's also a value extraction from the utilization of all of these, because otherwise people get away with it because no one is going to sit in front of the council and analyze what is going on in the municipality, because financial statements generally get seen once at the end of the financial year. But in our legislation, there are many instruments that enable quarterly feedback to councils to have an appreciation of things as they develop, so that by the time they become year-end problems, they can at least be nipped in the bud as they arise in quarter one, in quarter two, or in quarter three. As an office, we have already set up and tested a system of assessment of status of records in each of these municipalities, and we commit ourselves to make sure that that program continues to be one of those interventions that will help us identify at an early stage who is not appropriately placed at the till, so that certain decisions can be taken by the institution to restore that trust in their ability to account for financial management. So thank you very much for all of the time. Thank you very much, President Kadimeng of SALGA. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. We really appreciate you joining us, Honorable Nyambi, as well as Honorable Somio. We greatly appreciate your time and sharing this with us. And for the rest, we also thank our colleagues in the media for making it possible for us to reach out to various communities. And I'm sure that many are going to start talking, phoning, and doing all things necessary as they go through this report, because this time around we try to decode it rather than spend too much time talking about the difference between qualified versus unqualified. Is it or is it not whatever it is that it's being defined to be? We've now gone straight for the jugular. You'll see in some of these sections we speak about Khamahara municipality based on the observations that our team made. We speak about Dr. Ruth Mumpati in the context of the activities that happen in that town. We speak about OR Tambo, about a number of municipalities across the country, including the likes of Dr. Peyas Nodier in the Eastern Cape, and we reflect on specific matters that are reported on in the financial statement. So we hope that that report, once you access it, it will give you better insights also, which are less of code technical language, but are more about the practical things that have not worked, which have contributed to the negative outcomes. So thank you very much, and all the best for the rest of the day.
I can